All right, it's the 10-minute warning. Welcome, everybody, to the 220-1001 Core 1 A+ Study Group pre-show. Got about 10 minutes to go before everything gets started here. The stream is up and running. Thanks for being here. First day of May. Very good time to be here. This is our May study group. This first hour, I'm going to ask you questions from the A+ exam. You're going to answer questions. Hi, chat room. Welcome. Some folks already in asking questions. Thanks for being here. Glad you're here. Yes, if you are anywhere in the world, you're going to be able to take these CompTIA exams now online. They are all there and waiting for you. And it seems to be going pretty well. We're getting pretty good feedback. I've seen people say that it's been a kind of a normal process, the normal online test-taking process. So that part's good, to have that going so smoothly. So that's going to be available even after all of this quarantining is done, which is kind of nice as well. So that's good. Welcome, everybody. People checking in from all over the U.S. and elsewhere. That was a question from Juan Carlos in the Dominican Republic. It's kind of nice to be able to take an exam online, no matter where you happen to be in the world. And they do have information on the CompTIA website about these online exams and what you can expect, what language they are in or what languages they are not in, as it turns out. But they're migrating a lot of things over. It's an ongoing process. Hello, Maryland and D.C. is here. A lot of Maryland checking in. Burbank, California, good morning. Hello, Canada. Thanks for checking in. Lauderdale's here. On Las Olas, thanks for being here. Glendale, California, Chicago. So we got East Coast, West Coast, all over. There's South Florida. Welcome. Glad you're here. Someone who used to live in South Florida. Kind of miss that sometimes. There's Philly. Well, thanks for being here. Zimbabwe. Georgia is here. I'm assuming the one in the U.S. Montreal, welcome. New York is here. Welcome. Hey, France. Louisville is here. Portland, Oregon. We are getting West Coast checking in. Thanks for being here. Vegas is here. Nigeria, Bahamas, Ghana. Columbia, South Carolina. Chattanooga, Tennessee. There's Dallas. I put a few things out on the web over this past month. We'll talk about those in a bit as well. We're going to do all Q&A in this first hour, so get ready to go. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll find there are links to the questions and other information on my website at professormesser.com/live. But if you want to jump right to the questions, you can pop open a new browser window, go to professormesser.com/QA. That'll get you there. So that's useful. There's some Florida folks checking in. Welcome. Jacksonville's here. Us here in North Florida. New Mexico's here. South Africa, welcome. I was trying to send some of my products to someone in South Africa who had bought them, and South Africa's not taking our mail. So I can't send anybody anything in South Africa right now. I'm sending things all over the world, but they locked it down tight. Cannot get anything in there. I sent something and they sent it back. Nope, will not take it. My package was icky. My package was not up to their standards. They're not taking any packages. So only taking the bare minimum in there. So that was kind of interesting. So very good to have that there. All 220-1001 Core 1 exam is what we're doing today. And tomorrow, little programming update. Tomorrow, a rare Saturday study group tomorrow. We'll do the 220-1002. So Core 1 today, Core 2 tomorrow. So if you just can't get enough after today's event, there will be more for you tomorrow. We'll get this started in about 5.5 minutes. Stick around. I'm just making sure recordings are going. This is my streaming system up here that you see on this monitor. This is OBS. And it is doing the streaming to YouTube. I get a chance to see what's going on and kind of watch that. That's why it's a little bit of a delay on that screen. Not much of one, really. Doing pretty good to there. That's the signal going out to YouTube. YouTube grabs that signal. They process it, and then they send it to you. I am sending this to YouTube at 1080p. They're able to process 1080p signals very, very quickly. They're able to recompress them and do whatever magic they like to do on it in just a few seconds. So you're able to see this really very quickly after I send it. If I was to send this to YouTube at 4K, which I have the bandwidth and the technology to send them a 4K signal, it puts about a 20 to 25 second delay on you receiving it. And since we're going to be doing questions back and forth, having a delay like that can be a little bit of a problem. So today it's 1080p. It's where we're sitting there, which I think is pretty good. That's a pretty good signal to be able to see that. Now let me check. I'm looking at how things are looking here. I'm going to make a slight adjustment to my screen. I want everybody to hold on just a second. I'm not going anywhere. We're not getting started. We're not doing a thing. I'm just adjusting camera angles. We had a lightning strike here over this last week, and it really changed. I had to replace a lot of equipment. So that happens from time to time. Got through in ways I was not expecting. I thought I was prepared, and for the most part I was. It didn't take out any of the big expensive stuff, but it did take out a few things to have that there. What video games am I playing right now? Well, right now I'm on my Xbox, and it's all about Division 2. Trying to optimize my Division 2 things. But I tend to bounce around. Division 2's been pretty solid, though, for a little while, though. Just in it. I'm just trying to maximize my time in it. I get very little time. The power, it was not a power surge, it was a lightning strike. Very, very different things. For those wondering about lightning strikes, I live in Florida, so lightning strikes are very common. If you are connected to a piece of copper and the lightning hits, there's nothing that's going to prevent the lightning from going through that copper. So it doesn't matter if you have a surge protector. It doesn't matter if you have a UPS. It doesn't matter if you have anything. If the copper is connected, the lightning will hit it. So you can't stop lightning. That's a very, very, I don't know, maybe not so obvious, but it's very obvious once you get a lightning hit. And this hit a tree out in my yard. The tree, the lightning went into the ground where there are wires that run the irrigation system in my lawn. Those wires blew out my irrigation controller, which is connected to power, came into the power of my house that way. And then anything that was connected to power, it blew out a network switch, which unfortunately I did not disconnect from power. That network switch, the lightning got onto the network connections, and many components on the Ethernet network were blown out through the Ethernet connection. That is an extreme power over Ethernet example for sure. So boom, took out those. So a lot of the things that I used to control my lights, those were blown. I lost a television. There was quite a bit. So there was some craziness going on there. So I was scrambling. Fortunately, nothing of real note had to be replaced. Had to replace one of my converter boxes that I use for the video. I had to replace some power distribution units. I had to replace, what else in here? I had to replace a switch. The whole two switches were blown out. So I had to replace two switches. And they're sort of, I think the configuration of the studio is now back to where it was. I think we've identified and figured those out. But it was a night that there were some, just down the street, there was a tornado. It was a mess. So, but we're back. We're here doing these things. So that was the weirdness going on through all of those things. That's and it was one of those situations where it wasn't anything enormous. Obviously, the configuration you see here, there's just the mixer and the video switcher are relatively expensive. I automatically disconnect those from both power and network when something like that is going on. So it is completely isolated. The lightning would have to come into the ceiling and hit this desk directly for it to affect those, thankfully. So we're in great. So that's why the stream is up. We're in good shape. We're about to get started. Just a few seconds. We'll get the A+ study group underway. Hang on, everybody. We're going to get this thing going. I think we've got, let me check my recordings real quick. Recordings are going down here. You can see my Cylons down there. That's the video recording. I think we're in good shape. Why don't we get this thing started here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the May 2020 Professor Messer 220-1001 or Core 1 A+ study group. Thanks for being here. This is our monthly study group where in this first hour, I will ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA 220-1001 Core 1 A+ exam objectives, and you will be able to answer these questions online live if you are here indeed watching live. If you're watching this on a replay, you can follow along. You won't be able to have the interactive view of what we have there, but you will certainly be able to answer the questions, and you'll see how we do with answering the questions, and you'll be able to see how well you rank with all of those things that we are doing. I think most of you are doing pretty well with this. Here is the way that you can do this. So if you're watching this live, you can participate live by going to this URL. Go to professormesser.com/QA. That will open up a question and answer. I'll take a drink real quick. Now, you can also get an app for this. The app is called a Socrative Student app. Get it on your favorite app store. It may ask you for a name, for a room name. And that room name is Professor Messer, all one word. Make sure you spell it right. PROFESSORMESSER. Now, if you do that, there will be a question waiting for you. We call this our rewind question because it's a question that we had from last month. We get to see how well you remember. What did we do last month? That question from last month, it will ask you, a security administrator would like to restrict all RDP on the internal network. Which of the following should be blocked in the firewall? And you have 5 options available: UDP 161, TCP 443, TCP 3389, UDP 53, or TCP 445. And remember, do not put your answer in the chat room. Do not put any hints in the chat room. If you want to answer that question, you instead go to professormesser.com/QA and you lock in your answer right there. We'll come back to that in just a moment. Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us live. Thanks for watching the replay. Thanks for doing everything you do throughout the month. Thanks for subscribing to the YouTube channel. Whenever you want to find us, you go to professormesser.com/ and then the thing you'd like to find us on. So if you'd like to find us on YouTube, you go to professormesser.com/YouTube. If you want your daily pop quiz question, you can find that on Twitter at professormesser.com/Twitter. And we're doing our daily pop quiz questions on Instagram as well. They're in a Instagram carousel. So you get the question, you can slide to the left and see the answer. You can find that at professormesser.com/Instagram. A lot of you are buying things on Amazon these days. It's so easy now that we're inside a lot. And you can help us by visiting our site before you go to Amazon. If you go to professormesser.com/Amazon, you can use the link that is on that page to go directly to Amazon and start shopping there. You pay exactly the same price that you've always paid at Amazon, but they give us a little bit of a commission. Those little commissions do add up, so we thank you for your support there. You're welcome to also get a continuing education unit credit by watching this. Sometime in this first hour, I will tell you more about that. So be listening in if you're somebody who is trying to find out more about CEUs and be able to have that there. Today, we're going to talk all about the CompTIA exams, specifically the 220-1001. You're welcome to show up tomorrow. We're going to do all questions from the 220-1002, but those are the 2 exams. They were released in January of 2019, so they've been out just over a year now. They're going to be out for probably another 2.5 years. So make sure you have those exams. If you're taking or if you're studying from materials, make sure your materials say the 220-1001 or the 220-1002. Don't study from old materials. And the reason is, I'll tell you why in just a moment, why that's the reason. On the 220-1001, you have to earn a 675 on that exam between a scale of 100 to 900. I know it's a little weird the way they do the scales, but that is the number you have to get on the exam. The reason I say that you should have the latest exam objectives and the exam content and books and videos that all are written for the 220-1001 is that CompTIA added about 21% of the exam are new topics. So if you have old materials, about 20% of the content you're going to miss completely. That's enough to fail you on this exam. So make sure you have the latest ones whenever you step through this. Today, we're going to talk about the 220-1001. So our questions will come from these categories: mobile devices, networking, hardware, virtualization and cloud computing, and hardware and network troubleshooting. And tomorrow, of course, we'll do the Core 2 exams as well. Remember that these courses are available. Every minute of every video is available for you to watch online for free. This is not something that we just did over these last couple of months like you see other people doing. We've done this for years, and we will continue to do this for years. Every one of my training courses will always be free. You can watch it on YouTube, no registration. It's not behind a paywall. It's not something that we make you have to jump through hoops to be able to see. Simply go to the website, you watch them. You can also have offline versions of this. You can find out more about that at professormesser.com/download-a+. There's also, by the way, a pop quiz online available for these specific questions. I archive these questions from my study groups, and so you will find online, in fact, I should pull it up. I've got it on my website right here. Here's pop quizzes that are there, and the pop quizzes have 10 questions on each pop quiz, and I've started creating videos that are a companion to the pop quiz. So if you're wondering why a particular question was right or wrong, I stepped through those questions and the possible answers and why those answers were right or wrong. You can find out more about that at professormesser.com/popquiz, and I hope to have more of those videos come out shortly. Also want to tell you that you can get a replay of this on an audio podcast form by going to professormesser.com/podcast so that it can be downloaded to your podcasting program anytime you'd like. And if you check back, I guess this is Friday, so probably check back about Monday, we will have timestamps on the YouTube video description so that you can find exactly what you're looking for. You simply click on the timestamp and it goes directly to it. I also want to tell you that if you're watching my videos and you're thinking there's a lot of content here, 137 videos, over 18 hours of content, and you'd like some notes that are already pre-written for you to be able to see all of these things, you can find it on my course notes. Find out more about those at professormesser.com/1000 notes. There are both digital and video versions. That link will take you to the website that tells you all about those. I think I've got some up on my screen here. Pop those up. My course notes are available in PDF form, so they work on pretty much anything that you're able to watch them on. You can put them on your computer, on your mobile device, so you always have notes available wherever you happen to be. And I think that's an important part about studying, because you might be in line somewhere, you're waiting on something, you're in a waiting room. It's nice to be able to pull up those notes and do a little bit of studying. Find out more about those, professormesser.com/1000 notes. Now let's go back to that question we were talking about to start this off, our rewind question that asked, a security administrator would like to restrict all RDP on the internal network. Which of the following should be blocked on the firewall? 74% of you said that TCP 3389 was the right answer. 15% of you said TCP 443, and then it's single digits for the other options of UDP 161, UDP 53, and TCP 445. Well, RDP, it's useful to know, and many of you know this now, we're doing so much remotely, is the remote desktop protocol, RDP, and you're able to share a desktop over the TCP protocol using port number 3389. There's versions of remote desktop for all versions of Windows, and there are clients available in almost any other operating system. So if you're running Mac OS or Linux or iOS or Android, there is a remote desktop client for those so that you can connect to your Windows devices. So TCP 3389 was the right answer. I think most of you do remember that from last month. TCP 3389, 74% of you got that one absolutely right. It was answer C, TCP 3389. Now, if you take your A+ exam, one of the things that you will find is that the exam doesn't start with multiple choice questions. Multiple choice questions are like this one, where you get a question and there are multiple choices to choose from. Choose A, B, C, or D. But the exam starts with questions that are not multiple choice. They might be fill in the blank. They might be drag and drop. They could be questions that are having you match things or put things in a particular order. So one of the things I like to do on these study groups is my first new question of the month, I like to be a performance-based question. So the performance-based question I have for you today is a matching question, and it uses a technique you will sometimes see on the exam where it's not a one-to-one match. So hopefully you're ready for this. Let's do our performance-based question of the month. This question asks, match the network protocols to their function. And not all functions will be used. So I have 4 network protocols, but I have 4, 5, 6, 7 different functions. You'll see this on the exam. So some of these aren't going to be used because it is a one-to-one match. The 4 different protocols are SMTP, SSH, AFP, and RDP. Hopefully some of these you can remember. So I've already given you some hints already. Isn't that great? So it's SMTP, SSH, AFP, and RDP. So here are the 7 different functions. Function A is a graphical display of remote devices. Function B is automatic IP configuration. Function C is manage network devices. Function D is receive email into a mail client. Function E is a macOS file transfer. Function F is encrypted console access. And function G is transfer email between mail servers. Now, if you think they're in the right order, there is a wide open performance-based question answer that you can put in. If you think they are already in the right order, you can put 1A, 2B, 3D, and 4C. That's what you would, 3C and 4D. That's what you would submit into the fill in the blank that I have here. There are, of course, not in that order. If you think you know the answer, you follow this link right down at the bottom, professormesser.com/QA, to lock in your answer. Now, if you're using the Socrative student app, it may ask you for a room number. That room number is Professor Messer, all one word, PROFESSORMESSER. Make sure you spell it properly, or you won't be able to get into that room. All those little things. I should probably make it a different word, although I think most of us know. It's right here on the screen, Professor Messer. So type it in right there. I think you'll be able to get into that. Those are the 7 things. All of these abbreviations of network protocols here are all from the exam. So folks in the chat room are saying, so performance-based questions can be matching? They're not a simulation. They're not, in many cases, not a simulation. In many cases, they are a matching. They're a fill in the blank. They're drag and drop. They're putting things in order from highest to lowest or fastest to slowest. Performance-based questions are just anything but multiple choice. That's what that is. So this is a very good example of the type of performance-based question you may get on your exam. Not every exam gets the same questions. So it's one of those situations. So here you've got these 4, SMTP, SSH, AFP, and RDP. And you have to know, are they a graphical display of remote devices, automatic IP configuration? Do they manage network devices? Does it receive an email into a mail client? Is it used for macOS file transfer? Is it used for encrypted console access? Or does it transfer email between mail servers? Lock in your answer. Figure out what all those are. So let's see how you did with this one. Let's step through them one at a time and see if we can put them in the order. So we're going to have definitely 4 that match. This means that we will have 3 that are unused. So hopefully that's what you ran into, is those 3 that were unused. Let's step through each one of these and see if we can figure out more details of what is on this list. So let's start with SMTP. If you said that SMTP was answer G, transferring email between mail servers, you'd be absolutely correct. It's the simple mail transfer protocol to be able to make that work. SMTP works a lot like whenever you're ever trying to send an email, if you're ever trying to have an email go between mail servers, that's what you will use is SMTP to make that happen. Second on our list was SSH. SSH stands for Secure Shell. The name itself may lend you to the answer of F, encrypted console access. S being secure, that's the encrypted part. Console access is the secure shell. It's the terminal screen that uses an encrypted communication. That way nobody can see what you're doing on that console. Nobody sees your login name. Nobody sees your password. It's all an encrypted communication. Third on the list was AFP. This through the chat room just a little bit. Apple Filing Protocol is one that facilitates the macOS file transfer. So if you ever need to transfer a file from one macOS device to another, the native protocol that macOS uses is AFP. If you were in Windows, The native protocol that Windows uses is Server Message Block, or SMB. So you can think that AFP is the Apple version of Microsoft's SMB. At a very broad level, that's a good comparison between those two. The last on our list was RDP. Well, we just talked about that, didn't we? The Remote Desktop Protocol. Hopefully you remembered that, and that it was answer A, the graphical display of remote devices. So there's our answers: 1G, 2F, 3E, and 4A. But we had 3 others that were not on the list. So for bonus answers, let's see if we can figure out what these 3 are. One that we did not use was B, automatic IP configuration. What protocol is commonly used for automatic IP configuration? Well, automatic IP configuration we can categorize as the Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, or DHCP. So working backwards, I think we're filling in the blanks of things that weren't already there. The other piece that was not included on this was answer C, managing network devices. If you're a network manager or somebody who has set up a monitoring system for network devices, you've probably used the Simple Network Management Protocol, SNMP. SNMP very commonly used in the enterprise to be able to monitor switches, routers, servers, and other devices as well. And the last on our list was receiving an email into a mail client. It's a little different than the simple mail transfer protocol, which is sending mail or transferring mail between mail servers. In this case, we want to receive email, and there's really 2 that we could probably choose there. We could choose POP, the Post Office Protocol, or IMAP. Both of those protocols commonly used. Probably IMAP these days is the most common because it has so many more functions than POP does. So if you're using a mobile device, your tablet, or even a mail client on your desktop or laptop, you're probably using IMAP if it's something that is not an Outlook or a web-based type of email. Very common to see those protocols used, and sometimes you will see POP still used out there for whatever reason. So there's our answers. SMTP is transferring an email between mail servers. SSH is encrypting console access. AFP is the macOS file transfer, and RDP is the graphical display of remote devices. All of those protocols and more are in your CompTIA exam objectives. Make sure you are familiar with all of those. For those of you that didn't see AFP and link in your mind what that was immediately, make a note of that. You need to go back and learn a little bit more about that one so you can lock in what that one is. And more importantly, you need to know the ports on these. So make sure you go back and remember the ports on all of those so you have those available on your exam. That is our performance-based question of the month. You can go back in our archive to the last 12 months and get a different performance-based question on each of our study groups. So hopefully that can help you with your studies. Let's do another question. Let's shift now to multiple choice-based questions. Let's get out of the performance-based mode and do a multiple choice-based question that asks, a visitor to a company was asked to connect their laptop to the Guest One network, but that name does not appear in the list of available wireless networks. Which of the following would be the most likely cause of this issue? Would it be that the laptop operating system is out of date? Would it be that MAC filtering is enabled? Would it be that the wireless network is at full capacity? Is it that the network uses static IP addressing? Or is it that SSID broadcasts are disabled? Now, if you think you know the answer, go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We're going to try to figure out what this happens to be just by watching all of these things go by. I think if you're ever working with these technologies, some of these may even become more familiar whenever you're working through all of these. Maybe you're familiar with what this might be as well. Now, if you don't know the answer, somebody's mentioning this in the chat room. It's a great idea, especially if you are someone who is in the middle of the exam and you just don't know the answer. Take a guess. We do know on the exam that you don't get any points if you don't answer. You don't get any points if you get an answer wrong. And they don't take points away from you if you get an answer wrong. So really guessing is a fantastic thing, because if you don't know and guess and you get it right, then one of the great parts about that is that you get free points and you may not have even known it. So that part can be very, very useful to you. So that's another strategy for the exam, is knowing when that's going to happen. with those pieces. So if you are wanting to answer, you go to professormesser.com/QA. Right there at the bottom of the screen is the link to be able to answer this particular question. professormesser.com/QA. That's where you want. We'll all put in our answer. We'll lock it in and see what it happens to be. We had a number of you answered. Let's see how you did with this one. A visitor to a company was asked to connect their laptop to the Guest One network. That name does not appear in the list of available wireless networks. Which of the following would be the most likely cause of this issue? Was it the laptop operating system is out of date? Was it the MAC filtering is enabled? Was it that the wireless network is at full capacity? Was it that the network is using static IP addressing? Or was it that SSID broadcasts are disabled? 85% of you say that the answer is SSID broadcasts are disabled. SSID broadcasts are the thing that is able to send out the service set ID. That's what that SSID stands for. Service set ID is effectively the wireless name. It's the wireless network name. We just have a fancy name for it called the service set ID. We always have to make it more complicated than it really ever is, don't we? Now, it could be that you were too far away from the network, but usually when somebody's in your building and they're in your conference room and you're telling them to connect to a network, you're probably going to be able to see the network from there. Probably not the situation here, and indeed is not going to be the situation you would run into on this particular one either. Whenever you start looking at the list of networks that comes up and you would like to hide one of your networks from that list, you can disable what we call our SSID broadcasts. These broadcasts, these advertisements are sent constantly out over the wireless network to anybody who might be listening. And that's what populates that list. If you've ever pulled down a list of all of the available wireless networks and you notice that some are appearing, then others appear, and then others appear in there as well, you'll notice that that is populating itself based on the advertisements that are being received. So you can click a button on your wireless router, disable the SSID advertisements, and no one would be able to see the name of the wireless network. That does not prevent somebody from connecting to the network. If somebody knows the name or somebody is smart enough to sniff the air, they're able to capture packets right out of the air, they can still connect to your network. So this is not a security function. This is more of an administrative function, something that cleans up the list of names that's here. In fact, you can usually tell someone, go ahead and connect to the network. The name is Guest One. You can manually type it in and have that there. SSID not found, usually caused by an SSE broadcast disabled. That is indeed answer E. 85% of you got that one absolutely right. Some of you have already done this before, I can tell, to be able to have those things there. It's becomes pretty useful. The SSID broadcast being disabled, especially in areas where there are so many networks there, you can effectively get rid of a lot of the nonsense that would normally pop up on the screen. Well done with that one. Let's do another question. We've got more to go through here. By the way, this answer to this question comes directly from the 221,001 section 5.7 under troubleshooting networks. Having an SSID not found is one of those things you have to know how to troubleshoot, and that's from that section of the exam objectives. Let's do another question. This question asks, which of these connection types would be the most common for mobile phones and tablets? Which of these connection types would be the most common for mobile phones and tablets? Would it be DB9, Lightning, PCIe, Thunderbolt, or RJ45? You think you know the answer. Do not answer in the chat room. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Which of these connection types would be the most common for mobile phones and tablets? This is one of those situations when you're looking at the list of available things where the answer you think should be in there does not show up. In fact, you may have a mobile phone or a tablet and the connection type you use may not have even been listed there. Well, that's not what the question asked. The question didn't ask which one of these could be used. It says, of these connection types, which one is the most common? And that's the part that is pretty important to read through. Of these connection types, which would be the most common? So be sure that you understand that when you go into the exam, that you're not looking for what you think it is. You're looking for the answer based on the things that are available to you. And I think people who may have never taken an industry certification exam may be thrown by that piece to have that there. Those common connection types. Let's see how you did with this one. Which of these connection types would be the most common for mobile phones and tablets? Would it be DB9, Lightning, PCIe, Thunderbolt, or RJ45? 79%, that's a pretty strong majority, say it's Lightning is the one you would use. 14% said no, it's the other part, it's the Thunder. It's like Lightning, it's like Thunder. The Thunderbolt is 14% of you answered Thunderbolt, 3% for DB9, 3% for PCIe, and 0% said it was RJ45. If you're talking about mobile phones and tablets, there's so many different ways to connect to those devices. There is a micro USB. There's, of course, the newer devices have USB-C. But from the ones that are available on this list, the only one you would use to connect to a mobile phone or a tablet is the Lightning connection. This is a proprietary connection from Apple. This is one you will find for iPhones, iPads. I guess some of the older iPods will still have some people still work an iPod, right? There's some iPods that are still active out there, and they use Lightning connections as well. I guess they got past the older 15-pin connector, and some of the later versions did have that Apple proprietary Lightning connection to have it there. One nice thing about this over micro USB is you can plug it in any way. It doesn't have an up or down. So you just plug it in. You know you got it right the first time. It's also a little bit more durable, I think, than micro USB. Now, obviously, a lot of devices these days are moving to USB-C. The newer iPads have USB-C. The newer iPhones, not yet. Don't yet have USB-C, but I imagine they'll get there eventually. USB-C is pretty useful to have that there. It's very common. It's, of course, on the laptop that I have in front of me is a USB-C. So everything I plug into this device is all USB connectivity. In fact, the video you see from this laptop, which is what you're seeing on the screen right now, is being presented to you through a USB-C connection using Thunderbolt. So USB-C used for more than just USB. There's a few things that can be done with it. USB-C is a connection type. USB is a standard for signaling. Those are two different things. Kind of confusing sometimes, isn't it, to have those things there? So if you answered Lightning, you got it absolutely right. 81% of you did choose Lightning. That is the right answer. It would not be DB9. DB9 commonly used for connections that are serial connections. If you're configuring a router or a switch, there's usually a console port on those devices, and the DB9 is very commonly used on devices or connections like that. Some newer devices will use USB, but some of the older ones still have the DB9 set up on there. PCIe is for PCI Express. That's the internal bus type that you would use inside of a desktop computer. That is not a type of connector you would use for mobile phones to have those things there. And RJ45, as 0%, every single one of you said there's no way it's that. You know that that's the Ethernet connection, very commonly used for Ethernet. That's the connection you would see on an Ethernet connection. 13%, though, said Thunderbolt. Thunderbolt is a connection standard, but it's commonly used on desktop computers. So if you have a Windows or a Mac OS device or even Linux, there are Thunderbolt connectors on there that you can transfer data up to really in the tens of gigabits of speed to be able to transfer data. So a lot of the recording systems I have here and the data that transfer back and forth to my computer are using Thunderbolt just because it has such a high throughput. It is a standard that does not lend itself well towards mobile devices. Lightning was the right answer here. 81% of you got that one absolutely right. So this is one, whenever you're trying to figure out what the right answer is going to be, that's one that can really want to work through what those things are. Now, as we go through these questions, you'll notice that there's a wide diversity to these questions. A lot of different topics are on the A+ exam. The 221,001 has questions about hardware and networking and mobile devices and troubleshooting all of these things. And when you take the exam, you're going to get multiple choice questions. You're going to get performance-based questions. There are all kinds of different things you might run into. And so one of the things I found was that a lot of the Q&A that was available on the internet and even things that you could buy weren't really that great. So I wrote an entire set of practice exams in a PDF ebook form that anyone would be able to read. And this is one where you're able to go through each one of these questions and get details about not only why a question or answer was right, but I tell you why every answer was wrong. That's something that's a little bit different. For example, I'll show you, I've got the book in front of me right here. Here's a question that asks, a client's laptop sounds like it's booting normally, but nothing appears in the LCD display. After closer inspection, you notice the output is visible, but it's too faint to clearly see anything. What's the most likely cause of this issue? Is it a video card, an inverter, a video driver, or a power adapter? And you've got two things to choose from. A quick answer, which will just tell you is it A, B, C, or D, but another answer that says the details. And these are clickable. You'll notice my icon changes because it's a PDF. I can link you right to the answers. So for this answer A13, if I click that, there's the question and answer again, and it tells you the answer is the inverter. And I explained to you that the inverter powers the CCFL, and you notice one thing I do in the book is always spell out what these crazy acronyms mean. Powers the CCFL LCD backlight, allowing you to easily view the pixels on the display. Then I step you through all of the incorrect answers. Why was video card not the right answer? And I explain why. Why was video driver not the right answer? Why was the power adapter not the right answer? And then if you want more information, I give you a QR code. In fact, if you want to pull out your phone right now, put your camera on, and you don't have to take a picture. You just point your camera at that image. It will take you to the video that explains more information about this particular piece. Or you can simply click on the link right there to the laptop displays or the link that's available. I have a quick link there, so you don't have to type in a bunch of things. You can go right to the professormesser.link there to be able to do that. So this is all in this practice exam PDF. That's a single question. If I hit the back button in my PDF reader, I go directly back to the questions and I can go right to the next one that's on my screen. An easy way to step through each one of those, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, very easy. If you want more information on this, or even I bundle some of these things together so you can get a little bit of a cost benefit. So if you buy the practice exams with the course notes, it's a little bit cheaper. You can find out more of that at professormesser.com/core1PE, CORE1 Papa Echo. That's for practice exams, Core 1 PE. I just released these 1001 exams, and I'm currently working on the practice test book for 1002. For the folks that are asking in the chat room, I expect to have that available in the coming months. So be looking out for that. And it's a great way to support the site too, because every dollar you spend here helps me create even more content and do more of these live streams and do more videos and more Q&A on my website. Hopefully that can help you as well. Let's do some more questions. I've got some more Q&A here for you. So let's step through all of these. This next question asks, a system administrator uses a badge the size of a credit card to electronically unlock the door of the data center. Which of the following technologies best describes this connection? Is it 802.11? Is it RF? Is it Bluetooth? Is it IR, or is it RFID? A system administrator uses a badge the size of a credit card to electronically unlock the door of the data center. Which of the following technologies best describes this connection? Is it 802.11, RF, Bluetooth, IR, or RFID? Lock in your answer by going to professormesser.com/QA, and you can have your answer locked into that particular piece. No hints in the chat room, please. No answers in the chat room, please. We'll be able to figure out what all these things happen to be. So you'll be able to know exactly what these are as you go through this list. Whenever I start going through and trying to do these questions, I usually write these questions about a month out. I try to queue them all up so I can have them here. They're even sort of, I almost forget what I put into this list whenever I have these things here. But when you do that, and have these questions, they're sort of newer to me as I step through them. So I kind of have to go through them as well and try to remember what was the answer to that one. I also have on my list, I have the cheat sheet in front of, on another page, not in front of me, but I have the cheat sheet there to have those things there. So if I ever am at a point where I just don't know what in the world I was thinking of, I do have a way to figure that out. So just so you folks are remembering to have those pieces I always have a plan B. I always have a second option to go to figure those things out. So that's why we have those things there and the details of it. Let's step through what you think this answer is. A system administrator uses a badge the size of a credit card to electronically unlock the door of the data center. Which of the following technologies best describes this connection? 802.11, RF, Bluetooth, IR, or RFID? Again, 89% of you spot on with this one. RFID is the one you would use for this. If you've never had these are very common ways to unlock the doors of data centers or other things in your building. Usually you would badge in to a data center. You would badge into your building. Usually whenever you work through those, it's always like that. Whenever I try to step through them and try to figure out what the details are, when I'm stepping through a door, I used to have to step into a building and have all those things there. Whenever I do that, I always try to find a way to make sure that nobody's following behind me. So there's a piece when we get to the 1002, there's a security piece where we talk about somebody coming in behind you whenever you try to badge in. RFID is the technology used in these cards. If you were able to break the card apart, you would see that inside the badge is a very flat antenna and chip. And that antenna uses power through an inductive method. Whenever you put it close to that particular badge reader, that powers that chip inside and is able to identify you. So it's all squished in and sandwiched in there with the radio frequencies. Very nice. There are some badges of RFID that are powered. So we do have that in there as well. If you're in a position where you wanted to see some like that. And if you are in a corporate environment, very common, there's an example of using that credit card to be able to get in. These days, we're even seeing that in people's phones. You've got the capability in a phone or in a watch to be able to do a similar thing. It uses a different technology with NFC, but it's still a great way to provide some access because it's something that you have with you. And that is the method that we're using there is something we have. 89% of you absolutely right. It is the RFID. Well done with that one. Let's do another one. Here's one. Maybe I can start throwing you a little bit of a curveball. Let's see if you're familiar with this question that asks, a system administrator would like to configure a 3-drive array with redundancy and the most efficient use of drive space. Which of the following would be the best choice? Would it be RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 5, or RAID 10? A system administrator would like to configure a 3-drive array with redundancy and the most efficient use of drive space. Which of the following would be the best choice? Is it RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 5, or RAID 10? If you know the answer, lock it in at professormesser.com/QA. Please no hints in the chat room. Please no answers in the chat room. We'll figure out the details with this. Hopefully you're one that's someone who's configured one of these arrays or you've read about one of these and being able to work through them. This is one I think whenever I am trying to figure out what type of RAID array should I put on this particular system, these are the types of questions that come up. So hopefully whenever you're in front of a customer and they say, I need a RAID array and here's my requirements, and you'll be able to start going through that Rolodex in your mind and figuring out why and the different options that are available to be able to do something like this. So you've got some very specific parameters here. We'll step through it. A 3-drive array. It needs to have redundancy, and it needs to have the most efficient use of drive space. So which one is it going to be? And being able to work through this. This is a different kind of RAID than WoW. Definitely a different kind of RAID than Division 2. This is the hard drive version of RAID. Let's see if you know the answer. Let's see how we did. The system administrator would like to configure a 3-drive array with redundancy and the most efficient use of drive space. Which of the following would be the best choice? 74% of you say it's RAID 5. Not quite as strong as we were last time going through this. 16% said, no, you'd use RAID 10. That's the one you would use. 7%, single digits, say RAID 1, and 4% say RAID 0. Now, we've got 3 things we have to worry about here. A 3-drive array. We have to worry about redundancy, and we have to worry about the most efficient use of drive space. Not all 3 of those really fits best with RAID 5. The 73% of you that said RAID 5, yes, that's the one you would lock in. one of the more common ways to do this because it does allow you to have redundancy, which is an important part of this. It does allow you to have some very minimal number of drives because you need only 3 drives to be able to use RAID 5. You can, of course, have more than 3. And lastly, it's a very efficient use of drive space. We're not duplicating data. We're simply making a parity bit of some of the data that's there, this parity block on a single drive. So we aren't really using up or requiring duplication of everything. If we lose a drive, we're still up and running. The redundancy is there. That's why RAID 5 is one of the more popular ways to be able to have redundancy. I commonly use a variant of RAID 5 on the arrays that I have here because of this. I'm able to get more bang for my buck because I have more storage, but I still have that redundancy should any particular drive in that list ever go away. Mine actually has another way to set this up with additional parity drives, which go a little bit outside the scope of the CompTIA exam, but very useful to have that there. The 74% of you that said RAID 5 were really spot on with this one. You did a good job on taking through the view of this. Let's go through these other answers, though. RAID 0 is not really, it is a RAID type, but it's a zero RAID. Zero RAID is no redundancy. There's no way to recover this data if we happen to lose a drive. But it is a great way to store data very quickly across multiple drives, usually with multiple controllers. Although with our drives and our drive array systems we have these days, RAID 0 is maybe only a slight difference in performance. So RAID 0, not what it used to be. You don't really see a lot of RAID 0 out there because of that. RAID 1 is another very common method of RAID that you will see. You have the RAID 1 is complete mirroring. So anything you write to one drive, you would write exactly that same information to another physical drive. That way, if you lose one of those drives, it's a duplicate. It's a mirror of that drive to be able to have that there. So the RAID 1 configuration is one that does come in handy if you have the money to spend on those extra drives and you really want something that is an exact duplicate copy. RAID 1 is the one that's going to do that for you. RAID 10 is a different type of RAID that sort of combines RAID 1 with its duplication with RAID 0, which is striping the information across multiple drives. And you could potentially lose more than one drive in RAID 0, but it has to be the right drives. There's more information about that in my video on RAID. That video is from my 220-1001 series, section 3.4. The video is aptly called RAID, the redundant array of independent disks. And this is one where you do need to know RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 5, and RAID 10, sometimes called RAID 1 plus 0. All 4 of those are in the exam objectives from CompTIA. Make sure you are familiar with those and some of those very specific pieces that we were talking about with this. That might help you as well. If you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, one of the things that I will do is send you an email that has been digitally signed that certifies that you must have watched this because you are about to perform a particular set of functions that tells me that you must have watched this. So make sure you follow these instructions exactly to be able to earn this email from me. You want to go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There's a Contact Us link that will pop open a form. In that form, put your name, put your email address. Email's probably the more important part because I'm emailing this back to you. And there's a subject line. In that subject line, if you could put that this is the May 2020 A+ study group. And in the body of the message, if you could put on a line by itself, the super secret code word RAID 5. RAID 5 is our super secret code word of the month. And you can, of course, put anything else you would like into that message as well. All of these come to me. I like reading through your messages. I'm not able to individually respond to those because I get hundreds of these things in every month. But I do read through every single one of them, and I want to thank you for putting your comments in with those. So that's your process. Go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click Contact Us, put your name, your email address, tell me that this is the May 2020 A+ study group, and put the super secret code word of the month on its own line, RAID 5, and being able to do that. That will earn you a response from me. Usually takes me about a week to get these back to you. I do them in a big batch, where I will confirm that you went through this process. You must have listened to this because you got that information correct, and I'll be able to send that off to you, and you can have all of those emails there in case CompTIA happens to ask you for more detail. You'll have it, and it's digitally signed, so you can confirm it really came from me and that you did not modify it in any way. Let's do some more questions, shall we? We've got time for a couple more. Step through a couple more of these. The next question asks, a system administrator has configured a virtual machine with memory, CPU, and storage parameters. Which of the following should be used to activate this VM? Would it be an emulator, a snapshot, a hypervisor, a resource pool, or a virtual engine? A system administrator has configured a virtual machine with memory, CPU, and storage parameters. Which of the following should be used to activate this VM? Is it an emulator, a snapshot, a hypervisor, a resource pool, or a virtual engine? You think you know the answer? Lock in your answer by going to professormesser.com/QA and locking it in. Have it all there and available to you. We've got a number of people asking questions in the chat room, and this is available and being able to work through those. So that's one where could be useful if you happen to know this. So I'm noticing that the stream's going up and down and up and down and up and down. Hopefully some of you are noticing a few hits on your side. It looks like the folks at YouTube are sending the stream up and down and up and down. Don't worry. We'll get there. So welcome back, everybody. See, I waited for you. Sometimes this does happen in the middle of the stream. Don't worry. So feel free to be able to work through those. And since we did have a literal tornado coming down the street this week, I mentioned this in the pre-show, there is a lot of work being done on the infrastructure this week. So not entirely unexpected. Let's go through those question and answer for those of you that missed it. A system administrator has configured a virtual machine with memory, CPU, and storage parameters. Which of the following should be used to activate this VM? Is it an emulator, snapshot, hypervisor, resource pool, or a virtual engine? Let's see how you did with this. 68% of you, that's a pretty strong majority, say it's a hypervisor. 17% of you said you would use the virtual engine. 10% of you say it's an emulator. 3% said a snapshot, and only 2% said a resource pool. So really it's those top three with the double digits: a hypervisor, a virtual engine, or an emulator. Which one would you choose? Well, if you chose the hypervisor, you'd be absolutely correct. Hypervisor is that software that is able to manage this magic that happens with virtual machines. There has to be some central entity that is able to make sure that all the VMs are getting their appropriate memory, that they're sharing the storage the way they should be, that they've got everything in place for CPUs, and they're able to process CPU on an independent basis and keep all of this separate and all of this secure, which is perhaps an even more important part of it in many cases. You don't want one virtual machine leaking things into another virtual machine, which security people spend a lot of time trying to find ways to make that happen. The hypervisor is what keeps everything secure and everything safe with all of those. Usually it requires a system that does this type of virtualization. It does it in hardware, does it in the CPU itself, being able to work through it. So make sure you're familiar with the options available for your CPU so that you can do it in hardware. Now, most of our today's software that's a hypervisor really requires that you have this virtualization functionality in the hardware itself. There's some virtualization software. Some hypervisors can still use software, especially if it's only 32-bit. So you may want to check your software to see what it is. This is what manages that hardware, that CPU, that memory, the everything that goes back and forth from all of those things is the hypervisor. And so the 69% of you answered hypervisor, 10% said emulator, 16% said virtual engine. Emulator is a technology that is one that runs code that was built for a completely different platform. So if you have software that was made to run on a Mac, running PowerPC back in the day, and you brought that over and were somehow able to run it in Windows, you're using an emulator to do that because the Intel chip in your system doesn't know how to do that. If you've ever seen somebody run some of the games from the old arcade systems that were built on a completely different platform. Those were not Intel platforms. You're able to run it on an Intel platform because of an emulator. So those are good examples of things that you would run for an emulator and being able to work through those. And Wine does say it's not an emulator. It's totally an emulator. Why do they say that after all? I guess technically speaking, it's not, but it really is. Virtual Engine, by the way, I put that one in here in this list, is not a thing. I made that one up. Occasionally I will do that. But all of these other things, an emulator, a snapshot, a hypervisor, and a resource pool are real things. Those are technologies from the VM side. This came directly from the 220.1001 section 4.2. The video name is client-side virtualization. That would give you more information about those. So feel free to step through and learn more about those technologies from that side. The virtualization section of the A+, not huge. It's a very small little section in section 4, but it does have a pretty big percentage of the questions on the exam. People come out thinking there was a lot of virtualization questions, and I think I only have 3 videos for that entire thing, but those 3 videos definitely came from that whole section. Something to know about that, be able to work through it. Know your virtualization, know your cloud computing. That's all in that section 4. And you'll notice that cloud computing and other technologies like that do also come from that particular section. And you'll see it in Network Plus, you'll see it in Security Plus. So it's across all 3 of those. Another thing that they will use. Be able to work through those. Let's do another question, shall we? We've got some more time. I'm checking the clock, make sure that we're good on our hour of questions. This next question asks, during startup, a laptop computer shows a blank screen, beeps 3 times, and stops. Which of the following would be the most likely cause? Would it be bad RAM? Would it be a boot drive not found? Would it be an incomplete Windows update? Would it be a network outage? Or would it be the storage drive is full? During startup, a laptop computer shows a blank screen, beeps 3 times, and stops. Which of the following would be the most likely cause? Would it be bad RAM, a boot drive not found, incomplete Windows update, a network outage, or the storage drive is full? You think you know the answer? Don't answer in the chat room. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA. Don't put any hints in the chat room either. I always want to give some type of hints. I have to make myself not do that. No hints. I try to have you figure it out as if you're sitting in the exam room. You're trying to figure out the details yourself. It's up to you to figure out those pieces of it. You don't have Google available to you, so no Googling. That's not what you want to do. Don't Google. And figure out all of those. And you're right. Sometimes this is one that does go a little crazy. Being able to work through all of the different options and figuring out these details. This is probably a real world type question. Being able to work through these and figure out the details of it. Hopefully it's one you're familiar with. This is one that does absolutely come from the CompTIA exam objectives. So this is one of those types of troubleshooting things you do need to know about. So make sure you're familiar with them, being able to work through them. There's a whole list of things, by the way, you do have to know whenever you're working through them. So make sure you're familiar with all of those possible troubleshooting pieces that you will run into. They give you a nice big list. Fortunately, it's a relatively finite list. There's only so many things they tell you have to know about, but it's the 90% of things that you're going to find with a system having a problem, maybe even more. It's close to 100. So make sure, figure out the details of this. Let's see how you did with this question. Question asked, during startup, a laptop computer shows a blank screen, beeps 3 times, and stops. Which of the following would be the most likely cause of this particular problem? We have bad RAM, a boot drive not found, incomplete Windows update, a network outage, or the storage drive is full. What could it possibly be? Well, let's see what you think. 59% of you say it's bad RAM, just a little over midpoint for that majority. Boot drive not found. 39% of you said that's your problem. Your boot drive isn't there. It's not available. That's the piece that's probably causing the biggest issue. And then it just drops off. You have 2% of you said incomplete Windows update. 1% said the storage drive is full, and 0% say it's a network outage. Let's not say network outage very loudly. Let's not do that. In this particular case, let's only say that it's those other 4, because we think we know what Comcast may be doing today to get this running. Let's talk about what the answer really is. If you have turned on a computer and it just beeps at you and there's nothing on the screen, you get nothing, no type of feedback at all, then something fundamental to the computer is wrong. And this is something that is not only wrong with the computer, it's preventing anything from being presented to the screen. So you're really talking about, is it a bad video? Is it bad memory? Is your CPU broken? One of those things is the problem. We call this boot process post, the power on self-test. So as it's going through the self-test, it's checking the core functionality of the hardware that's in your system. So if it's missing memory or the memory's bad, if the CPU is not working the way it would expect, if it is the video card just is missing or is not working, this is where you would run into those types of problems. That is where you would get the beep codes. Beep codes. Whenever you get into beep codes, some people worry about understanding what all the beep codes for all the different manufacturers. You do not need to know that. You just need to understand that if it's beeping at you and the screen is blank, you need to understand why that is happening. Every manufacturer has a different set of beep codes. So it doesn't help you to start memorizing these things. They're all going to change with the next iteration anyway. That's one of those cases where you go back to be able to look at the manual. Yes, look at the manuals. You have to look at the documentation to be able to understand what those beeps happen to mean. So this is one where if it's a problem with the BIOS time and setting, if it's a battery issue, it will tell you that on the screen because the memory is working. We know that the CPU is working. We know the video is working, so it will tell you on the screen if it's that type of problem. Those types of issues during boot are things you need to know about. This is 3 examples of those that come directly from the exam objectives: a blank screen on boot, the BIOS time and setting, and attempt to boot to an incorrect device. Make sure you're familiar with those for your exam. Now, in our case, 58% of you said it's bad RAM. I think that's a pretty good number to be able to understand that that's what it is. Since the memory of the system is bad, it can't really do anything on the screen for you. It can't really process anything because all of the work to process, all of the executing of applications happens in RAM. So that's one of those situations that if the RAM is bad, everything stops. So how can we possibly tell you a problem exists if the RAM is bad? We'll just beep at you. I'll give you 3 beeps and we'll stop. That's how we do it. Now, what about these other problems? Wouldn't these other things on the screen provide a similar scenario? Let's step through each one of them. A boot drive not found. With a boot drive not found, our memory is okay, our CPU is okay, our video is okay. So if your boot drive wasn't there, you would get a message on the screen that says, quite literally, boot drive not found. It would tell you that the boot drive wasn't there because it's able to operate and function. It's just not able to start an operating system because there's no drive to start an operating system from. So we know that it couldn't be a boot drive not found. We would at least see something on the screen that gives us more details about that boot drive. An incomplete Windows update. If it's an incomplete Windows update, it's really gone south. I think your system starts on fire, doesn't it? There's some massive problem happens. We've had some serious problems with Windows updates, obviously, through the years, but it's not going to cause your system to completely give a blank screen and start beeping. Up to this point, Windows updates have not broken your memory. They've not broken your CPU. They've not broken your video. To this point, they'll figure it out, I'm sure, in the next rev. But those updates are not something that would cause your system to go into that mode. You get a completely different set of errors if your Windows update is really caused a problem with your system because it's able to show you that on the screen because your memory, your CPU, and your video is still working. It would not be storage drive full. Storage drive full would still boot your system, although the operating system would probably give you errors because it wasn't able to do the things it needs to do to write to that drive, but it would still show you information on the screen. So it's not a blank screen and a bunch of beeping. And none of you said network outage, thankfully. If the network's not there, your system will boot up normally. It just won't be able to connect to the network, and it would probably tell you that as well with a network outage. So that's one of those situations where on this, I did ask you for which of the following would be the most likely cause. But in reality, there's really only one thing here that it could really be caused from, and that would be bad memory modules in your computer. What would you do to solve this problem? Well, this is where you'd start trying to troubleshoot the memory. If you have some memory that you can swap out and try some different memory modules, they would have to be compatible with the system, obviously, then that's one of the things that you should do. But if you don't have memory, you may have to take that memory to another place and have them test the memory, or you have to get some replacements of that to be able to work through that as well. This is one where if you're in a corporate environment, usually you have some extra spares that are known good spares that you can replace it with and see if you just have some memory going bad. Maybe a good opportunity to put in more memory, run some memory tests, make sure it's not the interface. It could be the memory module interface on the motherboard itself that could be the problem. It could be an issue with the motherboard and something related to the traces on the motherboard associated with that memory. So one of those are quite an issue with those pieces. This is a very common issue. In fact, I think I took the 3 beeps. I think I looked up a motherboard documentation and I grabbed what an actual beep code was on this one. So some folks in the chat room going, I thought it just keeps beeping. Nope, it would not keep beeping. If it just keeps beeping and somebody's leaning on the keyboard, that's usually what happens. How many of us have gone to a situation where somebody says there's just a single bit of text going across the screen or it's beeping like crazy and they've got a stapler on their keyboard? That's what's happened. You take the stapler off the keyboard and you fix the problem. It's so simple. Stapler and a keyboard not listed in the CompTIA exam objectives, oddly enough. They need to add that to the next rev, I'm guessing. I keep talking about these exam objectives, and the reason I keep talking about them is because they are incredibly important to you. They are everything you need to know to be able to pass this exam. They list everything in the exam objectives. You need to make sure you get your hands on these. They should be the first thing you download when you start your studies. They should be the last thing you reference to check off to know if you're ready to take the exam or not. This is an incredibly important resource. This is a detailed, I think it's more than 20 pages in length, absolutely free resource that CompTIA provides to you that other testing entities don't do. This is quite remarkable in the industry. Go to professormesser.com/objectives to be able to grab that. I have a link there that takes you right to the CompTIA exam objectives, or just go to the Google machine, type in CompTIA exam objectives. It will take you right to them and being able to have those. Well, as many of you know, we do one of these study groups every month. This is May the 1st. May the 2nd, tomorrow, we're doing a 221,002 study group with 1,002 questions. Or you can come back in June. I've got the same thing scheduled for the 1001 and 1002 on June the 2nd, June the 4th. And of course, if you're watching this well past June, you can always check my website to know when the next live event is going to be. Go to professormesser.com/calendar. And you know exactly when the next live event is happening. We'd love to have you join us. And before I go past that, you notice on the 10th of June, I have my Network Plus study group. On the 17th of June is my Security Plus study group. So plenty of things to go through there. Well, thank you for being here. Thanks for being here in this first hour, but we're not done yet. I'm going to turn this boat around so that you can ask me questions in the second hour. Don't forget about my A+ course notes and practice exams. You can find out more of those about those at professormesser.com/1000notes. If you are someone who likes what you're seeing here, you may want to follow us on Twitter and get your daily pop quiz question, or on Instagram. We got our daily pop quiz questions there. You can, of course, follow us on YouTube and subscribe to the channel. We want to thank everybody who's subscribed so far. You really do help a lot. I'm having conversations with the folks at YouTube all the time now because they notice that you are supporting this channel. So thank you so much for that. And don't forget about supporting us on Amazon. There's a way that you can help us financially without spending any extra money out of your pocket by going to professormesser.com/Amazon. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for being here in this first hour. Stick around. We'll do more in the second hour. But we thank you for joining us for this first hour of the study group. We'll see you next time on the 221,001 Core 1 A+ study group. Let's see if I can get phone lines up and running. Should be able to get this going relatively easy. Get all of these things here. Yeah, I don't do the whole smash your button. It's your boy. subscribe kind of thing. I don't think that quite fits my persona. Do you? Probably not. Hey, who's the old guy saying it's your boy? Yeah, that would be me. Let's get the phone lines up and running. I'm going to tell you in a moment how you're able to call in as well. I need to get my Skype going on the list here as well. Let's see if I can get called in, and hopefully the network will stay up and running. I'm sure it'll be fine. That's kind of loud. Let's see if we can fix that real quick. I'm going to type some things in on my side.
Enter your 6-digit PIN number.
That sounds a bit redundant. I'm going to type in my 6-digit PIN number. Welcome. So I'm glad everything's working there. I'm going to take questions from the chat room. If you're in the chat room right now, either on YouTube or on my website, you can put questions in right there. I see them go by. They're all here. This is one where I am watching them. This is the chat right here going by. You can barely see it because my big head's in the way. I need to take that off my screen there. So I am watching the chat go by. You're welcome to put questions in there, or you're welcome to call in. I have a toll-free number. You can call in free anywhere from the United States, continental United States, 855-785-RJ45. That's your phone number. West of the Rockies is 855-785-7545. And you'll be put in the queue. I see some folks are already calling in. Thank you for that. You can also call in from anywhere in the world for free. No Skype minutes required. Simply start up your Skype program. Put a +1 at the beginning of that. You don't have to use any Skype minutes for a toll-free number. +1 855-785-7545. That's the number on the screen. We will leave it there so you can call in and ask those questions. Folks in the chat room asking, will I do a CCNA course? CCNA, very popular certification. I would love to be able to do some Cisco courses. I've done some Cisco practice or Cisco course notes in the past, and I'm Cisco certified, so why wouldn't I do that? My background is a cybersecurity systems engineer, so it's right in my wheelhouse, doing high-end networking, security implementations for some of the biggest companies in the world. So it would be nice to create some content around that. I don't know if I've quite figured out exactly what I want that to look like, but it's on the list. It's pretty high on the list too. Right now we're talking, working on the 221,002 practice exam book. So maybe right after that's done, we'll have to see how things go. Maybe I could do more than one thing at a time. How about that, Professor Messer? Maybe try to use your brain a little bit. I don't know if that's possible. I'll have to see if I'm even capable of doing that. Well, that may be possible, though. We may have to do something like that to be able to have those things there. Maybe it's not a full course. Maybe it's something else. I don't know. We'll figure out the details of that to have those things there. For those of you that have been checking in, CompTIA has been providing their remote testing service. This is brand new for those of you that aren't familiar. The remote testing service is something that you can take the test now from anywhere in the world, all online. Now, it's not a complete duplication of what you might find from a normal testing center, but these days it's a great option because a lot of the testing centers aren't open. And CompTIA has said we will continue to have these remote testing services online even after all of this is over with. This is just the new normal. It's just a new thing that we're going to continue to do. So that may be something we work on as well. I'm seeing great feedback about it. People sent me direct comments about it, saying that it's working very well. You have to do a lot of work beforehand to make sure you've set up everything the way they would expect. They have a program they have you run before you even schedule it to make sure it's going to work properly on your computer. I've noticed some people aren't doing that, and they get ready to take the exam and things aren't working. That's not what the situation you want to be in. When you're ready to take the exam, you want to be in that exam mode. That is not a time when you should be troubleshooting your computer or trying to get the room set up properly. You want to do that the day before. You want to kind of get everything ready to go, and then you just walk in and be able to take this as if you were in that room, being able to work through those pieces. Let's go the phone lines and talk to some folks who have called in. Thank you for holding. We'll go to our first call, 661 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Professor Messer. This is Blake. I'm calling from Dallas, Texas today. Actually addressing what you just talked about. I've got my 1001 scheduled for this Monday online in my home office because it's really the only option. There's
Yep.
no others. Everything's still closed.
Right.
So a little bit nervous about the test, mainly what we were dealing with earlier with port numbers. Not sure why this happens to me, but whenever I'm going through a test and I start seeing a bunch of different numbers, it gets jumbled around. So
Yep.
I was wondering, are they to trick us and confuse us like pretty close to, like, let's say, I'm using IMAP and they ask me what the port number is, and obviously it's 143, but will they try to put in like 141, 142, 143, 144 as options just to sort of trick you up on that kind of an intensive level?
Wow, I'm having like PTSD back to some Microsoft exams I used to take, because Microsoft would do horrible things like that to you. Thankfully, CompTIA is much saner with their questions. I found the questions on the exam to be relatively straightforward. And like the questions I give you, where all of the answers are, for the most part, real things, it's about the same situation with the CompTIA exams. All of those things that they're going to ask or request or have in their answers are real things. They're not going to give you a list of 5 things that are very close to each other, sound close to each other. Is it I before E or E before I? They're not going to do that to you. It will be very clear if you know the answer, which one of those answers it is. It should jump right out at you, and you should be able to see it. I will also say, because you're not the only person who runs into these challenges with port numbers on the exam, one of the things that I like to explain to people is, and this is probably not fantastic advice. I will tell you right away, it's probably bad advice, but I'm going to give you the advice anyway, because I think it might help some of you when you get into this. If you were to look at the CompTIA exam objectives, and I'm going to pull it up on my screen so we can have a look at this. I'm going to go through the section on networking. Now, the section on networking, by the way, is 20% of your exam. Comes from all of networking, the entire 2.0 domain. 20% of the exam is networking, 27% is hardware, and 27% is troubleshooting, but 20% is the networking part. On that networking part, there's section 2.1 through 2.8. It's all on my screen right here, 2.1 through 2.8, and there's a ton of content. So 20% of your exam comes from all of these. Only one section, 2.1, has these specific ports, and I'll bet that you probably know about half of them at this point. So statistically speaking, my very bad advice to you is that if you're that good enough with the port numbers, drop the topic completely, and go learn some other things. Because I think when we get wrapped around the axle on things like this, that we're spending more time on this than we should be, and we could be using that time to learn other things, probably more other things that we can really use when we get to the exam. So it becomes more of a time management issue, I think, than anything. That's one of those that you should really think about. And they're not going to trick you. They're not going to try to pretend one thing is another thing. They're not going to give you sequential numbers. It will be relatively straightforward. They're at least a little bit nicer than that on the exam, thankfully.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you. And again, just want to say thank you for everything you do. I've got your notes. I've read through them dozens of times, and I've watched your videos twice. So I'm feeling pretty confident, just worried about getting tricked up there.
Don't worry about it. As long as you know this content, you're going to do fine on the exam. Best of luck.
Thank you.
That's one where I think a lot of people worry about this. I see it also in the Network Plus exam. When you get the Network Plus, there's an aspect of Network Plus where you need to know about subnetting, which is a little bit math intensive, certainly relatively speaking to everything else. There's a lot more there that you have to worry about with knowing how to subnet. And people get very worried about, they spend weeks on subnetting, and what they find out is they might get one question on subnetting in the whole exam. Some people get 0 questions. This is one of those situations. You might not get any questions on port numbers because it's all a random thing. You might get 1, you might get 2. And that's why I say that strategy I give that's a very bad recommendation. But for those of you that are worried about these questions, maybe it's not so bad. Maybe it is a pretty good question to determine where we should spend our time studying. Instead of memorizing these port numbers, I could go memorize something else. You've always got time to come back to this. And in fact, I think most of you already know that that's the case for these. I don't know what that was. Somebody snuck in there. Somebody fought themselves off of hold to be able to take a call. So let's do that. Let's force somebody else off of hold ourselves. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hold ourselves.
Oh, see, now I hear myself. Hi, caller. Are you there? We're going to have to listen into the phone and not listen into the stream, and I think you'll do just fine. Nope, we didn't make that one. Well, you're welcome to give us a call back. We'll figure out the details of those pieces. Let's go back to the phone. 773 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Davish from Chicago area.
Hey, thanks for calling. I think you've called before. What can we do for you?
Yes, Professor, very nice talking to you. Sir, you heard of these days they talk about 5G for
Yes.
communication.
Oh,
for
boy.
You know, somebody said they are really, it's a very harmful thing to people, whatever. What do you think about that? What is your idea about 5G?
Well,
And
I think change is scary. I think when people see anything that's changing, change itself is scary. It doesn't have to even be about technology. Anything that changes in our life is scary. Anything that changes with technology is even more scary because most people are completely unaware of these radio technologies. You can't see it. It's all invisible. It's going through our bodies. The reality is, and I tried to explain this to someone early, on a previous study group, and I don't think it quite hit, but 5G is 1G faster than 4G. That's the big difference. That's it. We're done. Nope. No more explanations needed. It's a faster 4G. Does it cause cancer? No. Does it cause coronavirus? No. Are birds falling out of the sky on fire? No. It's just a faster network. And by the way, there are plenty of networks that we are using in these frequencies already that are not 5G. They're just other wireless networks that are using these same frequencies that are in use today that send data very, very quickly, and they work great. It's just a faster way to network. That's really it. I'm trying to figure out, when we went from 3G to 4G, it was really quite a thing. I mean, there was this huge amount of speed that we went from 3G to 4G, but nobody was really complaining about it. I think the thing that most people are worried about with 5G, and the part that really gets people crazy, is the faster speeds are enabling us to do more things wirelessly. Some people are putting those in the categories of people are trying to do worse things to us because the network is faster, but it's a faster network. That's the real issue. Do you go from your 100 megabit network to gigabit network? How much evil happened when we went from fast Ethernet at 100 megabits to gigabit networking at 1 gigabit? Did we suddenly launch into flames? Was there a No, we didn't. It was just a faster network, and we were able to stream better. We were able to get on YouTube. We were able to watch a live stream and learn better. All the things that you were able to do on a wired network, wouldn't it be nice if we could do it on a wired network? That's what 5G is. So the people that are worried about it, the people that are attacking 5G antennas, yes, this is really a thing. If you're watching this years later, that was a thing that people actually did. So don't worry so much about the 5G. Be happy that we're getting a faster wireless network, that we'll be able to do more things with it, and maybe have some other options for networking that are different than the options that we have today. That sure would be nice. That's my opinion of it. If the world ends because we put 5G in place, none of this would matter anyway. So what do I know?
And also, the professor, they said that there would be less need for towers. Is this correct?
Well, the 5G, it depends. 5G has certain different frequencies that it uses, has different implementations that it uses. Some of the higher frequencies need more towers. Some of the frequencies need the same number of towers we have today. I would think if you're in a city, that the density of towers in a city is probably going to allow you to run the higher speeds over the higher frequencies just because all the buildings are close to each other. But once you get out in the country, nobody's going to be putting a tower every X number of yards down the road just to facilitate these faster speeds. It doesn't make financial sense for companies to do that. So I think in a city, you're going to really see the benefits of 5G. Once you get out the country, it's just going to be probably a little bit faster than the 4G we have today, relatively speaking, but you're not going to have that the tower density crop up into our rural areas that people are worried about now.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for the answer. Wonderful. You really shed light on it. I'm glad to talk to you.
I appreciate the call. It's a very good question as well, and one that's come up quite a bit. So thanks for calling. I think probably it's the worry. It's the concern. It's something new. It's something we've never seen before. And when you get into those higher frequencies, people get very particular. I mean, there are still people out there that they say they can feel 802.11 wireless networks and it's harmful. Well, they can't feel it and it's not harmful. But they really feel like they can, but they're very worried about it. For them, it's a very real issue, but I think the issue needs to be handled and perhaps not worry so much about the technology, because we spend a lot of time studying the technology and making sure that it's safe before we start using it. One of those things that do come up quite a bit. 5G is just going to appear and suddenly it's going to be there and we're going to be using it. And suddenly we're going to think back and going, wait, wasn't this supposed to be something bad? Wasn't it all supposed to fall apart on us? 5G was really going to be the end of everything. It's remarkable. In this past month, we've seen the news stories of organizations that have had to, set up protection. They've had security around 5G antennas. I've seen this specifically in the UK because people want to set the antennas on fire. They want to tear down the antennas. I don't know. Okay. That's remarkable to have those things there. But that's my opinion of it anyway. I think it's going to be kind of nice if you're in a city to have some of the functionality for 5G, some of the speeds available for 5G that you just don't have available today. It's going to really change what we're able to do to have those things there. When is my next Security Plus study group for May? Well, you can find out when all of the next study groups are going to be by going to professormesser.com/calendar. Did I ever set up I think I set up an events link too. Does it go the same place? If we go to professormesser.com/events, was I smart enough to set that up? Nope, I did not. So I got to do that too. But calendar will get you there. Plus, if you go to professormesser.com, at the top of the page is a link for calendar. Boom, it's right there. You'll be able to see it. It'll take you to that list. So if you're watching this on a replay and you're wondering, when is the next one of these things going to be? Go to professormesser.com/calendar. I keep them constantly updated whenever that calendar is there. So that's what's going on. What does Mrs. Professor Messer do when I'm doing these recordings? Fortunately, these days, my studio is in its own physical building. I had to build it in my own building for this. So I moved to a place where I could be in its own facility. When I started doing this full time, it used to be I did this in my house in a spare room. There's dogs. The FedEx guy shows up. There's kids running around. There's people knocking at the door. There's the doorbell. It doesn't really have a great setup. So what does she do when I'm recording? I have no idea. I don't know. I'm over here in the dark doing my study group. She is just doing what she does. She's making sure the house is still there. She's the rock. She's the one that manages everything about everything. She manages me to be able to use those, and I'm there. So that's what she is doing, is making sure that everybody's doing exactly what they should be doing at that particular point. And this particular point, I am doing what I should be doing. So that part is good. Very quickly, what cell phone do I use? Is an iPhone? Is it Samsung? Currently, it's an iPhone. It's an iPhone. It's not even the latest one. It's the 10. iPhone 10 Grande. Is that what it's called? I think that's what it's called. 10 Grande is what I have. I think that's the technical term. I like the big ones. When you get to my age, they need to be maybe twice as big. We want the cell phones to really be the size of a small tablet would be great. I think that's why they keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. I will upgrade this thing eventually, but it will probably still be Apple to have those things there. I've just not ever made the switch over to the Android, not for any reason other than Android back in the day, and I don't think you can see it back there. It probably isn't even in camera view is my BlackBerry that I used to use. So I went from BlackBerry to at one point I had a Sidekick for some of you, old school. There we go. I was rocking the Sidekick, and then moved finally to the to iPhone, and just have stayed there. So it's one of those. It works very well for the things I'm running here, and for most of what I am doing here in the studio. For those of you that have seen this before, my primary workstation is Mac OS, primarily because it's great for video and it doesn't reboot on me without me asking it to. This also on the screen, though, is Windows 10 up here doing the streaming. I love my Windows. It is a workhorse, and so incredibly important for what we are doing. You would not be able to see this if I wasn't running a Windows 10 in this environment. And if you're on my website right now, you're on Linux. So I don't care what operating system you use. I'm using all of them. I want to be able to use all of them. So it becomes very useful to have that there. Let's go back to the phones. Let's go to the unavailable caller. Good for you, caller, with your privacy. Thanks for calling. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello?
Well, hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? That is some bad audio, caller. You got some bad stuff going there. Maybe come off the mic a little bit and give us another shot. Do you have a question? That is not so good. You may want to use that Skype call-in testing service and see if you can maybe work through that just a little bit better. That was pretty bad. It may be my connection. Let's find out by going to 646 and see how this works. Hello, caller. Which name are you calling from?
Hello, Professor. This is Christian Martin in New York.
Christian, that is a fantastic reception we are getting from you. What's your question, sir?
Oh, great. Oh, sorry. First of all, thank you very much for all your videos and courses. I've watched you throughout the years, so it's been extremely rewarding and learned quite a lot.
Glad to hear it.
My question has to do with how to recover from failure. So I've been quite lucky in the sense that, I don't have any certification, and most of IT-related knowledge that I have was pretty much through learning online, myself, self-taught. Video courses. I got a subscription, and I've watched video on pretty much YouTube and the internet. My background is in finance, and 3 years ago I started working in IT at a non-profit organization, and I've had an opportunity to interview bigger companies. And just yesterday I had this one opportunity over lifetime, and I think I blew it. I don't know if I blew it, if it's going to come back, whatever. But I know because I got a reply that says, no, I didn't make like they say it here, I didn't make the cut.
Gotcha.
So, and I think I'm kind of getting to the point of where I am worried. And that motivation, I'm just at the point where it's like, should I have gone back to finance? What am I getting wrong? Because there was a question that I pretty much know well. Example, one of the questions is, I'm not going to give the name. I'm not going to give the name of the company.
Sure.
But one of the questions was,
thank you.
www.example.com. What happens in terms of a DNS resolution? And I blanked.
Gotcha.
I just went. I was like, gosh, what is happening with me? And this is kind of the same thing that you get that I've gotten in the exam, where you've got a situation where you're prepared, but you're in front of the screen, and suddenly your brain just freezes. Where are all my answers? I was working with this. So I guess that's what, back to the initial question, is just recovering from failure and finding a positive way of channeling that energy into success. So if you have some insight knowledge into that, I would be very much appreciated.
Well, you have come to the right place, because when it comes to failure, I am a pro. I have a huge amount of experience in failing. And once you kind of get through this industry, really any industry, it's not really specific to technology. I think it's more specific to just you being on Earth after a certain amount of time. You tend to run into these situations where you fail. It is completely normal. Yeah. It is completely standard. You at least have some genetic ability. There's the stiff upper lip and the British way of you get back up and you just keep going forward. And really, that's a pretty good strategy. I'll give you a couple examples. When I was in college, I wanted to interview for a particular company. This was the company I wanted to work for. They were the ones in the industry that were really making a move. This is obviously prior to any significant internet rollout. This was back in the days prior to the internet really becoming a thing. And I really wanted to work with this high-end consulting company. They were international. They were the ones to work for. And I went to an interview with them and I just tanked it. It was just awful. I didn't connect with the person who was doing the interviewing. They were asking questions because I'd already had some experience in working with technology. I worked in the college supercomputer, but none of those things came up. It was a horrible situation to be in. It was an awkward 30 minutes of me trying to explain why this was useful. They finally said, well, let's see your GPA and we'll see what we can do, which I knew was like a death knell, almost like they knew that my GPA was awful because my GPA was awful. I said, absolutely, I will get that GPA to you. Thank you so much. I'm going to leave now. And I got out of the room. I really sat on that one for a very long time. You think about what happened during the interview. You replay different things. Oh, I should have said this thing. I should have said that thing. And you really can't. There's no way you can go back to these things. Now, as it turns out, so glad it didn't happen. And these are the things you sort of look back after years of doing this and think, wouldn't that have been crazy if I'd had taken that job? Then I wouldn't have had these other opportunities that had come along, and I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing at this point. That's pretty much what it always happens. People always say things happen for a reason. That's really what they mean. It's not that there's some larger natural or supernatural reason for that, although there certainly could be, and feel free to wrap yourself around your favorite natural or supernatural reason for doing some of those things. But I think that it becomes too much. We dwell on these things too much. I give another example. I'll give this one that's very specific to someone taking a certification exam. When I was working finally for what ended up being one of my dream jobs and working for a company, I had to pass an exam on network cabling. These were legitimate exams. These were the CNX exams, Certified Network Expert. The X was for the expert part. And there were exams on Ethernet, on Token Ring, on FIDI. You're starting to see how dated this was. On ATM, that is asynchronous transfer mode, for those of you wondering. And there was an exam on cabling. Well, as it turns out, network cabling is kind of a thing. There's a lot of details to network cabling. Turns out I was not as strong as I thought it was. I went into the exam, tanked it. And embarrassed, wasn't really wanting to tell anybody about that. Studied up a little more, said, we're going to take it again. Kind of stealth mode, went in, took the exam again, and tanked it. Did not pass. It was a little better than last time, but didn't pass. It took me 3 tries at that certification exam to get that one down. This is one of those situations, though, where you just sort of have to suck it up and say, yeah, well, I'm not so strong in that. I was not ready for that piece. I was not ready for the exam. I was not ready for the interview. I didn't have the tools that I needed to make that happen. And maybe that wasn't. Maybe I'm not the right person for that particular position at that particular time. But after a while, you start to use other strengths. So if going into that interview, they were asking you a lot of technical questions, so now we need to work on those strengths. Maybe we need a job that focuses on things like DNS and networking and working with connectivity to web servers. Maybe we need to talk to more people who are doing those types of jobs to hear more stories of the problems they've had. It's one of the things we do in this industry. We just get together and say, let me tell you about the problem I had last week. Boy, was it a doozy. And we usually are able to do that by going to Cisco user groups, Microsoft user groups, Palo Alto Networks user groups, and learning and talking to the people that are in our area. Those are great places to learn. Some of the Reddit subreddits are great places to learn those stories, and people can talk about the things that they have done and the problems that they've had and what they ran into. I've run into situations professionally where I've made bad professional decisions. I went into the wrong job at the wrong time. I've made bad technical decisions where I typed in the wrong thing or moved the router a wrong way and pulled the power and stopped an update from occurring and turned the router into a brick. This is going to happen to you throughout your career. Now I'm bringing back all these problems I've ever gone through. Now I'm going to have to go into some type of therapy when the call is over. Here are all the problems I've ever run into in my career, and that's just some of them. It's just constant. People make mistakes, and I've made plenty. People I've worked with made plenty. All you can really do is pick yourself up and just keep going. There's one of the things I really did start to learn when I created this business, and I think if you talk to anybody who's in business for themselves, you're constantly trying new things. And quite honestly, at that point, you're expecting them to fail. The fact that people are even watching these videos at this point is a success of this strange experiment that escaped the lab. And here we are. And I'm just happy about it because I've run into the wall many times and fallen down because it just didn't work. Let's try podcasting. Nope, didn't work. Let's try publishing books commercially. Nope, didn't work. So plenty of times where I tried that. What I did in every single one of those cases, though, and this is probably the thing you can take back the most, Christian, is that the next time you're in an interview and they ask a question like that, you're going to know the answer. Because every time one of those things happens, it's an enormous learning opportunity. All right, next time we're doing a router update, I'm not going to touch the router box, and I'm going to keep people away from it. We'll set up some cones. Nobody gets near the router when I'm doing an update. When I go into a interview the next time and they ask me about ARP or the DNS resolution process or IPsec or whatever it happens to be, now I'm going to know that answer because now it's burned into my brain that I'm not going to know the answer. In fact, I can even tell them the story of me going into an interview and completely tanking this question, and we can laugh about it. And I think at that point, once you get to a point where you can be very comfortable telling people you have no idea how that thing works, but I do know how to figure it out. I do know where to go to get the answer. You actually become a different technician. You become a different engineer at that point. I think that if you're the person who can sit in the front table of the training class, and the moment the instructor gets to a part where you ever notice the room sort of changes, where everybody's like, what? What's he talking about? I have no idea where he is. If you're the person who can hold your hand up and go, hold on a second, I think I lost you. Can you rewind that just a second and go through that again and let me figure out what's going on? The second you become that person, I think you become a better engineer. And I think you become a better person who is in an interview and who can handle those situations. You will constantly in your career be faced with situations where you don't know the answer. My last professional job where I wasn't working for myself, I was working as a cybersecurity systems engineer. Every day I got a question from a customer that was asking me questions that I didn't know the answer because we were dealing with the newest technologies, the most advanced type of technologies, and you couldn't possibly know everything that is in that entire realm of things. So that's the key is you dust yourself up, you get up, you go to the next interview, and you learn what they're doing. You find more people in the industry, you meet more people. And what you find is if you are trying to get those jobs, these things start working together. As you find the people at that work, oh, you already know somebody who works in that company. You go in the interview, now it becomes a more relaxed interview. Now it becomes a different conversation. And I think the more relaxed you are in those situations, the better the interview is going to go for everybody and the better impression you finally make, even if you don't know the technical answers they're presenting you with. It's a different scenario entirely. I don't have a single Here's what you can take with you. Here's the magic coin that you can put in your pocket. It's a combination of things, but I think it's one of those situations where you just become accustomed to failing a lot more as you go through your career. And as it turns out, the more you do it, the less it really bothers you. The more you almost expect it, but the more important thing is you know what to do when it happens. You can recognize it happening, and then you can go the next step to figure out where to go from there. And you may want to reach out to that person who interviewed you and said, I don't know why I blanked out on that one, really blew that question, but if another job comes up and you guys are looking for somebody, I'd love to come back in and talk to you. And maybe that's the thing where they go, wow, this guy thought he really blew it, but he reached out. Let's keep him on top of the list again and have him come back in. And you never know. It certainly can't hurt to make something like that happen. And that's maybe where you should focus on, Christian.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed.
Fake it till you make it. That's what we say in the industry. Sometimes it's not about faking. Maybe it's just like telling people, I don't know, and we'll figure it out together. And I think, and sometimes that's probably the best way to go with it.
Much appreciated.
I appreciate the call. Thanks for that. Thanks for letting me go on a bit of a ride there with those things. Here's one thing I should always tell you as well. If you are in an interview, never lie. Never tell somebody you know something and you don't. Never put on your resume something that they might pick out. I've told this story before that I was on an interview with someone who said they were a member of a professional business fraternity, but they didn't know that I was also a member of that professional business fraternity. And there are ways in these fraternity things, these special code words that you can say to know if somebody is in the fraternity with you. And I threw out one of those code words in the middle of the interview. Didn't faze him. He didn't know. He didn't know the response to the super secret code word of the fraternity. I thought, what else have you lied about on this piece of paper? And it threw off the whole interview. Never lie in an interview. It's such a bad idea. Don't do that. Don't go like that. Caller 646 area code. Thanks for holding for so long. What's your name? Where are you calling from? I hear myself.
Oh, my name is David Cannon.
Hi, David. You want to turn off that stream and listen into the phone? What can we do for you? What's your question?
Yes. Sorry about that. Okay. This is my update electrical engineering, and my name is David Cannon. So I'm doing electrical installation, but I'm trying to change my career to IT.
Okay.
And I came across your contents, which I found very interesting. Do you think if I just focus on the contents you provide, I have a chance of passing the exams?
I think from a strategy perspective, this came up earlier this week. Somebody had sent this question in. And one of the things I tell people is at least watch the first video of my A+ course. Same information is in the first video of my Network Plus. Same information is in the first video of my Security Plus course. And I tell people, go to that video and see what my strategy is, because I put into that video what I think the best possible strategy is for passing your exam. And the shortcut, I'll give you the quick answer here, is there's never one thing you can do to make the best possible chance of passing your exam. Have people used my videos to pass their exam before and just used my video? Yes, they have. Do I recommend people do that? Of course not. You should use as many different resources as possible. You should, and I mentioned this on my website, I have a list of A+ study resources where I say you should watch videos. Absolutely. Videos teach you in a way that books cannot. But I also tell people, get a good book, because a book is going to be able to teach you in a way that videos can't. They work together to be able to fill in the blanks between each other. I also tell people, get lots of really good Q&A, being able to see how well you remember these things from the books and videos, and get plenty of hands-on. Be able to run through some of those command lines that you see in the course, so that when you run a ping, when you do a dir, when you look at these Linux commands, you start working through an IP config and comparing it to an if config and knowing when to use them and where to use them, that becomes a very useful tool. It becomes a useful thing to know. So it takes a lot more time. You can't just sit there and passively watch a video and expect to do really well on the exam. If you haven't already have experience in the industry, you're already familiar with some of these topics, maybe you only need one of those things. Maybe you only need videos. Maybe you only need a book. Maybe you only need Q&A. But if you want to have the best possible chance of passing the exam, you need to use a combination of these things because they teach you in different ways. They lock it into your brain in different ways. They fire a different synapse in your brain than others might. I think that's going to be your best strategy. And we're going to wait for me to finish talking now.
Thank you.
I appreciate the call, David. I think that's going to be your best strategy, is going through and figuring out, now which ones do I get? Some people only need 2 of those. Some people need 3 of those. Some people need all 4. And I recommend you use all 4. But you may find that you're losing points by not using all 4. So it's up to you. Find the thing that makes sense for your style of learning, and that's going to work. From the chat room, are the CEU codes that I use, are those good for previous recordings as well? Yes, they are. Since I'm using a code, there's no registration. You don't have to register for this to prove that you were here. Because the code is there, you have to listen in, because it's not always in the same place. You have to listen in to when the code is going to be. So I'm able to verify that you must have watched it because you have the code for that previous study group. So it can be on demand or live. Doesn't matter. So easy to do that. To have those listed there. Let's go back to the phones. You've been holding for so long. 704 area code. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
My name is Sean Smith. I am actually calling you from Marietta, California.
Well, thanks for calling. What's your question?
Well, I'm not new to the IT business. I mean, I've done a lot of freelance, whatnot. However, I'm new to the professional side of it. I recently just found your videos due to my brother-in-law. He works for the government. The question I have for you, however, is what would you recommend on time balancing between the different you bounce around a lot? Like I started with the A+ and then went into network security whenever you hit security, and then I went back into A+. Do you have a way of retaining it easier?
So you
basically what I'm trying to say.
Are you working currently on the A+ content? Is that what you're working on, earning the A+ certification?
Attempting to, yes.
Well, one of the things that I think is useful for anybody who's working on A+ is to use the course notes, or not even the course notes. Go directly to CompTIA and get their exam objectives. Those are free. They are a comprehensive list. I'm going to put the exam objectives up on my screen so you can really see them. A lot of people don't realize just how much content is in these exam objectives. When they break this down, let me put the actual screen up. I know you can't see this on the phone, but the people watching on here, for instance, the first domain of mobile devices has a section that says, given a scenario, install and configure laptop hardware and components, and you need to know about hardware and device replacement for keyboards, hard drives, SSD versus hybrid versus magnetic disk, 1.8 inch versus 2.5 inch, memory, smart card reader, optical drive, wireless card Bluetooth module, cellular card, video card, mini PCI Express, screen, DC jack, battery, touchpad, plastics frames, speaker, system board, and CPU. That is the detail for just section 1.1 in domain 1.0 of mobile devices for the 221001 exam. And that's the first 2 pages, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 pages of that level of content detail. That is effectively a checklist for you. That will be able to show you everything you need to know to walk into that exam and do a good job. And so that's the one I say when people like me, I get on a topic and I start floating around and going down a particular rabbit hole, I have to pull myself out and stay on the structured list. And this is the perfect list to use. I've had people take the exam and they'll come back to me and say, wow, on that exam, I got asked a lot of things I was not expecting. And I say, wow, how's that possible? The exam objectives tell you everything to expect. What could they have possibly asked you? They go, well, I just thought the exam objectives were a basic overview. I really didn't look at them. They didn't even realize all of this very valuable, important content was in the exam objectives. So if you're someone who really wants to try to add some structure to your learning, this is a great way to structure it. You can break off a tiny piece of it, break off a number of different topics, check those off when you're done, and then go to the next set. You can do as much or as little as a time as you need, and they're all listed there for you. And when you get through them all, you're now ready to take your exam.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for calling. I think that's, I say it often in my study groups, and I know it becomes redundant. I say it over and over and over. You're probably tired of me saying it, that it's the exam objectives, it's the exam objectives, and it's the exam objectives. But it really is. These are so unique. Cisco doesn't do this. Microsoft doesn't do this. VMware doesn't do this. Nobody else does this to this level of detail. They might give you a high-level view at Microsoft. They give you a high-level view at Cisco, but nobody gives this level of detail. And it's not limiting you. It's not giving away any answers on the exam, but it really is focusing you. It really helps with your studies, and that's why all of my videos are built around these. I used it as a checklist when I made the videos. That's how important these are. So you can do a similar thing for yourself. Let's go 773. Hi, caller. Which name are you calling from? Hi, caller. I hear myself.
Yes, Professor Davish.
Oh,
again,
welcome back.
Sorry to, thank you, sir. Referring to few of your conversations before, as you know, these days, you look at this one as they want you to have 15 different technologies. And I don't think that many of them are used in that environment, but they want you to know all kinds of things. I mean, and any of them would take a lifetime to learn.
Right.
How would you answer that?
It's remarkable.
Thank you, sir, for
that's a good question, because it's remarkable how many job descriptions are written without any idea of what it takes to put together a single person to make that job. And sometimes it's a job description that's written by somebody who has no idea about technology. And I see sometimes that people will be very intimidated by this. Let's say it's a help desk position. They're looking for someone who is entry-level help desk position, a junior help desk tech. Maybe that's the job description. The junior help desk tech needs 10 years of experience in the industry. They need to have their MCSE, their Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer. They need to understand the intricacies of installing and maintaining Windows Server. They need to know. They go through this entire list. You need to be Cisco certified. It's just an enormous list of things that, quite honestly, nobody in the world has this list of credentials. They've just sort of jumbled everything together. I unfortunately see this most often probably on governmental type job offerings, but not always. I would think most organizations are very good at really defining what the job requires. It's very rare you would run into these, but I think because we run into them and they're so crazy that we often remember them as being something that's very common. What I recommend to people, though, if you see a job that is for an entry-level junior help desk tech and they ask for the world, just ignore that. Just send it in and be able to send your resume in and have them make the decision on whether this is a job they think that you would fit into. Because they're going to notice that all these resumes coming in, all the CVs and the listing of things don't match up with what the job is. So they're going to take whatever the best is of what they get anyway. So feel free to send yours in. Never limit yourself. All they can really say is no. And I'm fine with that. You get to a point, I think this kind of goes back to that other call with Christian. I'm kind of used to people saying no. I'm fine with that. Great. I'm glad we got that out of the way. I'm going to go to the next thing now. I'm not going to waste my time.
Yes, Professor. Professor, as you know, unfortunately these days, it's very common to be what they call a lot of what they call intrusion happens for ransomware reason. Is there any particular software, and how would you really protect an environment from being attacked by ransomware demands from all over the world? It's happening all the time. I see that quite a few times. and hang up from this. Thank you for your answer.
I appreciate it. Thanks for the call. The ransomware is an enormous issue, but for the vast majority of us who are working at home, we have a home computer. We need to protect our home systems. The ransomware gets on your system the same way that any other type of malicious software gets on your system. They can't get in unless you allow them in. They can't get in unless you're the one clicking that link in the email. They can only get in if you're the one clicking that executable that's attached to an email message sent to you. So the first key is, of course, being aware of how to keep these programs from running on your computer to begin with. So that's one thing. The other thing is to make sure you have very good antivirus software. For those of you running Microsoft Windows, the Windows Defender that comes with Windows 10 is one of the best anti-malware, antivirus software that's out there, and they have their monthly updates to look for things that are even beyond that. But if you're like me and you want more coverage of these types of malware systems, there are specific anti-malware programs on the market to go through. There's plenty to choose from, but things like Malwarebytes is a good example of an anti-malware that's on the market. It costs some money to subscribe to that anti-malware, but they're constantly updating signatures, and they're being a little bit more specific than something like Windows Defender that is really a broader type of antivirus / anti-malware software. So the key to preventing any one of these types of infestations is to prevent it from getting in from the first place. Whenever you look at some of the larger ransomwares that have occurred, and ransomware, they're really focusing on small towns, cities, in some cases larger cities, to be able to do this. Governmental type agencies, they're getting into those systems by taking advantage of people's unknowingness to running the software. They didn't have a system set up to protect their data. They didn't have a system set up to filter out executables in their emails. It's things like that. It's so easy to get around. All they have to find is that one door that somebody left open. So the key for you on your home systems is to make sure all the doors are locked. If your kids have computers, make sure that Windows Defender is running. Ask them, is it running? Are we backing up the system every day? Because ultimately, the best possible form of preventing ransomware is a good backup. Even if they find some way to get into your system, they come across a 0-day, they're able to take advantage of it, they get on your computer, and they let's say they encrypt every piece of data on your computer, you just wipe it and restore from backup, and you're back to where you were. So on your home system, these large hard drives are very inexpensive these days, relatively speaking. There's software that you can load up, usually from the hard drive manufacturer, but there's also freeware and commercial products as well that will copy backups onto those drives every day. And it's an encrypted backup. They can't get onto these systems. The malware can't infect the backup. That's also a concern. So that if the system was infected, you just restore from backup. That's one of the things that really frustrates me a lot with malware and infections and ransomware specifically for some of these cities and county organizations is they just didn't have a good backup system. If they did, they could just wipe the system and restore from backup and they're done. There are some organizations I used to work with that it didn't matter what type of platform was on the workstation. If they thought that machine was infected, they grabbed the whole machine, they took it back to their lab, they replaced it with a new machine, they clicked a button, the image was restored from that system off the network, and in a matter of minutes, the system was back up and running and they were there. It was beautiful. Then they could take that system back to their lab, see what type of malware was on it. Was it something that was known? Do they need to submit this for a signature to their antivirus companies they work with? Do they need to look for this somewhere else in their organization? And then they could just keep it moving. But it was all this image they had set up. It was very modular. They could remove a machine anytime and replace it in a matter of minutes. Really beautiful. And unfortunately, that's not the case with everywhere you would go. Just the way it goes. So always have good malware, anti-malware in your system. Always, always, always have a backup. A good backup solves so many problems for you. So many problems for you. It's such a simple thing. Set it up so you never have to think about it. And the only time you would ever have to use it is when something weird like that happens. Let's go South Florida, 954 area code, Broward County. Broward, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
How you doing, Professor Messer? This is Kevin from Pembroke Pines.
Well, Kevin from Pines Boulevard. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fine.
What can we do for you?
Last time I spoke to you, I was saying about I got that new promotion at Comcast Business.
Yes.
Now I just got the final offer. Has everything been finalized? And should be starting my new virtual training class on May 18th.
They're all virtual training classes these days, Kevin.
Yeah, that's the problem. I was telling the people that I kind of prefer the brick and mortar, but given the situation what's going on and given that you the lucky ones up north, we won't be free until I guess around July or May. Or June probably.
That's true. For the folks that are listening in here in Florida, they are starting today. We have a little bit more flexibility as to where we can go and what's open and what we can do. But the folks in Palm Beach County, Broward County, and Dade County down in the southern part of Florida, which are our densest counties, are still in quarantine and have limitations already. One of the things, well, first I will tell you, by the way, you bring up Comcast Business, and I mentioned in the pre-show about being hit by lightning here. The lightning got onto my cable system and literally fried the coax from my cable modem to the box down the street that I'm plugged into. Did not break the modem itself, just fried the cable. The Comcast Business was here in hours when I called them, replaced the cable, and I was up and running, and I'm able to do this live stream today thanks to that. Very, very fast to have it here. I was very impressed with those pieces. So you're planning to go to this training class for these pieces. Are there things that they're expecting of you that maybe you weren't ready for? There are questions they're asking of you that are something you weren't expecting?
Not really, because, the programs that we're going to be using, I already worked at a previous job, and I was already using those programs, so I'm kind of familiarized with their programs, so it should be easy for me because I'm already familiarized with everything.
Nice.
And plus I know IT and I, know everything, so it should be easy for me. It should be. My main thing is that I prefer to be in front of people in brick and mortar because just in case I have any questions or whatever, I kind of instead of talking to somebody do online.
Yeah. This is sort of the situation we're into, and it's the problem we have with what we're doing today. We're kind of getting a little better at it, I think, but I'm also looking forward to the day that we can actually go out and talk to somebody face to face and not have to worry so much about those pieces. In the meantime, we need to get better with taking advantage of these situations. I mentioned being able to ask questions and being able to, every time you ask a question, you can learn something a little bit more. We have to be better about doing that online because it's not always as easy online. You can't raise your hand and have people see you quite as easily as if you were all sitting in the same room having these classes and being able to work on that.
Exactly. That was what I was telling my girlfriend. I was saying, I say for the training, I kind of prefer doing a brick and mortar because just because I really want to ask certain questions or and make sure I know all the policies of Comcast. And I don't want to do nothing out of policy and get in trouble. The QAs may hear me or whatever. And it's I kind of prefer that instead of doing things virtually.
I think we're all getting a little bit better with that. One good thing for you, though, moving into the Comcast business side, for those of you that aren't familiar, Comcast has an entire business division that really focuses on things that businesses need, like the voice over IP implementations. They have a little bit different in their internet offerings. They have all-in-one systems for wireless. It's quite a listing of things that are available. So I think it's great that you're going to have opportunities to learn a lot more about how to plug into these different networks and some of the requirements they have with IP addressing and NATing and the applications they're running. It's a whole new world of things, and I'm very excited for you.
Yeah, it's SMB, so it's definitely different from residential. I mean, hopefully if I really become proficient in this, I'll try to move to the enterprise, which is the big boys, the enterprise echelon, the really big boys, they're the corporations and whatnot. So yeah, so I'm glad I'm started. And like I said before, thank you for all your teachings and tutelage, because it really did help me out.
Sky's the limit, Kevin. Congratulations and best of luck with that promotion.
Okay, thank you.
That's one of those things that I think is a natural progression. This is sort of the way I did this in the industry. Is I started as the field services guy. I got in a car with equipment. I would drive to a customer site. I would fix things. And then it moved into the corporate job, where I was in a corporate environment with one company doing corporate operating systems, networking, those types of things. And then from there went into the enterprise side, where I got to talk with many different companies about the things they were doing. So it's just a progression. It's just a learning step-by-step process to be able to make that happen. Nobody starts at the enterprise level. You always start down at the bottom with the grunt work, with the figuring it out, with the learning as it goes. And eventually you get to the point where suddenly you realize you've learned some things and you might be able to help other people with the things you know. It's a process. It takes some time. But one of the great things about IT, and I say this often, is the sky really is the limit. There is no ceiling on what we do with IT. You can take this in any direction to do anything you want to do. And I think Kevin's story is a great example of doing exactly that. Back to the phones. Let's go to this caller. Hi, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Professor, I'm calling from the Netherlands.
Thanks for calling.
My name is King David.
What's your question?
Yeah, Professor. My question is, I heard from my CT, which is not of the high level, but after some years, I've been working in a field that is entirely outside the computer from what I studied from. But now I want to make a shift or a change in profession and job because of the future, to say the least. But the challenge I'm having is, how can I start with CompTIA? I want to CompTIA certification in A+. And I'm seeing A+ 2201 and A+ 2202. So which one should I first take? And which one should I leave? Are they the same or only one?
This is a common question if somebody's getting into the industry on how do you get into IT. It's in many cases, it seems like an entire mountain. It's almost unsurmountable to be able to break into this industry with what you're doing. But the reality is that it's stepping stones, very similar to what I was just mentioning. Many times in our industry, especially in the United States, employers want your very first industry certification to be the A+ certification. It's a very common and very popular certification in the U.S. It's not necessarily like that in other parts of the world, but it's as far as our geography is concerned, it's a very good first step. One of the things I've noticed lately is some organizations are looking for something that's a step before that. And a good example of that is CompTIA's IT Fundamentals. You'll see this mentioned as the ITF Plus exam, although technically it's the IT Fundamentals exam. This is one that is a precursor to A+. It's the beginning part of A+. So I think if somebody was looking at A+ content and they saw all of the mobile technologies and operating systems and hardware and troubleshooting, and they think, wow, that's a lot for me to start with. I need something before that. I need a primer to A+, something that would lead me into A+. You might want to look at the IT Fundamentals. This is a certification from CompTIA. It's not the most popular certification from CompTIA, but I do find that many schools and universities are using this as their initial training before they really jump into the more detailed technical training. So if somebody is really interested in that, and what a good point somebody's making in the chat room is CompTIA is offering their ITF training on their website for free during this time frame. So I don't know where they have that. Maybe it's on their front page they would talk about this and what they're doing with it. Free e-learning on the CompTIA homepage for CompTIA IT Fundamentals. Sign up for free training, and now you can take their training with the ITF Plus. That may be a good place to go to start, especially for somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience in the industry. Maybe you should consider looking at that. That might be a good place to start. I appreciate the call. That's a one I almost even forgot that they were offering that for free. So thanks for reminding me, chat room, of that. It was Michael in the chat room mentioned that. Thank you. Maybe something that works for you. Maybe A+ is just not for you. You want to start earlier. That's a good place to go to be able to do that. I think that's one that I would think about using as well. In the chat room, another question about what's my opinion on the new Linux Plus. I think the new Linux Plus is a good Linux certification. I don't know that the industry has picked up yet on Linux Plus as being the Linux certification that people are looking for. A lot of people go over to the Red Hat side. The Red Hat certifications are very popular, but Linux Plus is very popular as well. I think the key with Linux is just that you get the knowledge. I think Linux knowledge can really do a lot for you in the industry, whether you work in a Windows environment, a Mac OS environment, or any type of environment. There's going to be some Linux in there. In fact, Mac OS being Unix-based, there's a lot of overlap with those two. And what you're going to find, if you're running Windows, you're almost always going to be running Linux anyway in your environment. Why not get that knowledge? And what you'll find is once you learn a lot about Windows, you learn a lot about Mac OS, you learn a lot about Linux, you start learning there's not a lot of differences between these. In fact, many of the high-level things that are going on in those operating systems are exactly the same processes done in different ways. So that's one of those that does come in handy to be able to do that. Another sort of an adjunct to that, and some people asked about this in the chat room, is that some people look at networking certifications in a similar way. In fact, many people ask, should I take Network Plus or should I look at the CCNA from Cisco, the Cisco Certified Network Administrator? Those are two very different certifications that are designed for different people that have different goals and objectives. They are not designed to replace each other in any way. And if you are someone who is looking for a career in network administration, you want to be able to manage switches and routers, you want to be able to configure these wide area networks and local area networks, then maybe the CCNA is for you. If you're somebody who's looking for their first job in a network operations center, you're going to be kind of the help desk of the NOC. That's what the Network Operations Center is. And you need a basic understanding of networks and some of the terms and technologies that are used in these networks. The Network Plus is a better fit for you. So you need to figure out what your goal is first, and only then can you really decide what fits best to get me there. What building blocks, what stepping stones do I use to be able to get me to that point? Should it be Network Plus? Should it be CCNA? Once you know the end goal, knowing what those stepping stones are going to be should be relatively straightforward. So that's the real key. The link for the free training from CompTIA is right on the CompTIA website. Go to CompTIA.org. All I did was go to CompTIA.org. It brings you to this guy. I don't know who that is. There he is. I just scrolled down, scroll, and there's this nice lady. Free learning for CompTIA, IT Fundamentals, plus means support. CompTIA cares. There you go. And always nice to have free training. Everybody's giving away free training. We've been doing it for 10 years. I hope you've enjoyed it. We continue to do it. We're not going to stop when this thing is over. We're going to keep doing this. I just can't stop at this point. I have to keep doing more and more and more. So we will keep doing more and more and more. Thank you for being here in our first hour of Q&A. Thank you for joining us in our second hour of call-in show and taking questions from the chat room. For those of you that have been through these before, normally we have a few days and we do another one of these. No, not this week. Tomorrow, come back at the same time, and I'm doing my 1002 A+ study group. They just can't get enough of that. So we'll do a 1-2 punch on a very rare Saturday study group. For all the people that have ever asked me, can we please do a study group on the weekend? Your wish has been granted. It's funny how the schedule works out sometimes. So we'd love to have you back here. Tomorrow we'll do 1002, which includes operating systems, security, and other technologies as well. Thanks for joining us this time. We love to have you here. We look forward to seeing you again. See you next time on the A+ Study Group. Thanks, everyone.